The mail carrier, bless his weary heart, slipped the dreaded envelope into my mailbox. It was crisp, white, official-looking, and bore the unmistakable stamp of suburban tyranny, the HOA logo. I sighed. I knew what this was. Karen had struck again. I ripped it open, the crisp paper practically screaming bureaucracy at me. The letter, typed in that soulless font that all official documents use, began with the usual flowery, yet passive-aggressive, greetings. Then, it got to the meat of the matter. My driveway. Apparently, it was excessively long and had a negative impact on neighborhood uniformity. Uniformity? I muttered, my internal monologue kicking into high gear. Last I checked, this wasn't a Stepford community. Unless they're all secretly robots, in which case, my spiral driveway will be the least of their worries. Maybe Karen's the head robot, sent to enforce conformity. That would explain a lot. I grabbed my copy of the city building codes, the one I keep specifically for situations like this, and marched over to the HOA office. It was a beige building, naturally. Beige walls, beige carpet, probably beige staplers. Inside, I found Mrs. Higgins, the HOA president, perched behind her desk like a particularly stern beige-colored bird. "Mrs. Higgins," I began, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice, a Herculean task. "I received your letter about my driveway. I have the city building codes right here, and as you can see, my driveway is perfectly compliant." Mrs. Higgins adjusted her glasses, her gaze as sharp as a tack. "Mr. Alex, isn't it? While your driveway may technically meet city code, it does not meet our aesthetic standards. It disrupts the flow of the neighborhood." "The flow?" I repeated, my sarcasm threatening to breach containment. "You mean the flow of identical houses with identical lawns and identical flower beds? Because honestly, I thought that flow was a little stagnant." Mrs. Higgins pursed her lips. "We've received several complaints, Mr. Alex. Neighbors are concerned about the length of your driveway." "Karen," I said, not even bothering to hide my eye roll. "Let me guess. She measured it with a ruler and then compared it to everyone else's?" Mrs. Higgins huffed. "That's beside the point. The point is, we're requesting that you shorten your driveway to conform to the neighborhood standard." "And if I don't?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We'll be forced to issue fines," she said, her voice laced with that bureaucratic sweetness that always meant trouble. "And those fines will escalate until the issue is resolved." "Logic? Reason?" I muttered to myself as I walked out of the beige building, the beige walls seeming to close in on me. Those words clearly aren't in their vocabulary. I might as well be arguing with a brick wall. A very well-manicured, HOA-approved brick wall. The injustice of it all, the sheer pettiness of the complaint, ignited a fire within me. It wasn't just about the driveway anymore. It was about principle. It was about standing up to the tyranny of suburban conformity. "Fine," I said to myself, a slow grin spreading across my face. "You want a shorter driveway? You'll get a shorter driveway. Technically speaking, anyway." The seed of an idea, gloriously ridiculous and utterly petty, had been planted. And it was about to blossom into something truly spectacular. My mind became a whirlwind of architectural mayhem. Each idea that popped into my head was more outlandish than the last. A catapult? Too messy. A drawbridge? Too medieval. Then it hit me. The spiral. It was perfect. It was ridiculous. It was petty genius. "Think Escher meets a parking garage," I muttered to myself, a manic gleam in my eye. "It'll be a masterpiece of petty engineering." I spent the next few days sketching, calculating, and generally losing myself in the glorious details of my revenge plan. Blueprints emerged, covered in annotations and arrows. I even built a miniature model out of cardboard just to visualize the sheer scale of the project. It was magnificent. With my plans finalized, I set out to find a team of contractors willing to bring my vision to life. This proved interesting. The first few contractors I approached looked at me like I was insane. I'd try to explain the concept, using my hands to demonstrate the spiraling motion, and they'd just nod slowly, backing away like I was about to unleash a swarm of wasps. "So, you want a driveway that goes up?" one bewildered contractor asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Not just up," I corrected. "Up and around, in a spiral, like a spiral." He blinked. "Like a curly fry?" "Closer," I said, "but bigger, and made of concrete, and with multiple levels?" He just stared at me. I sighed. This was going to be harder than I thought. Finally, I found a crew, a slightly eccentric bunch who, after I showed them the blueprints, immediately recognized the comedic gold mine I had stumbled upon. "You're building a spiral driveway?" The foreman, a burly guy with a handlebar mustache, asked, a grin spreading across his face. "That's right," I said, puffing out my chest a little. "Think of it as performance art, but with concrete." "I like your style," he chuckled. "Let's do this." They looked at me like I was crazy at first, I recounted later. Then I showed them the blueprints, and I swear I saw dollar signs in their eyes. Or maybe it was just the reflection of the setting sun. Either way, they were in. The construction began. The neighborhood watched with a mixture of confusion and amusement as the spiral structure began to take shape. Karen, I'm sure, was apoplectic, though I made sure to avoid her. I could practically feel her laser-like gaze boring into the back of my head whenever I ventured outside. It was exhilarating. The sound of construction, the whirring of drills, the clanging of metal was music to my ears. It was the sound of sweet, sweet revenge being built, layer by glorious layer. The day finally arrived. The spiral driveway, my magnum opus of petty revenge, was complete. It wasn't just a driveway. It was a multi-level monstrosity of concrete and steel, a testament to spite-fueled ingenuity. It curved and spiraled, rising like a concrete serpent, culminating in a parking platform that offered a panoramic view of, well, the rest of the neighborhood. I'd even added LED lights, because why not? And decorative railings, because safety first, and also because they looked hilariously out of place. The pièce de résistance, however, was the comically oversized sign I'd placed at the entrance, HOA approved compact driveway. I stood back, admiring my handiwork. "It's beautiful," I declared to myself, a touch of madness in my voice. "It's ridiculous, it's perfect." The reaction was immediate. It was as if I'd unleashed some sort of suburban Pandora's box. Kids instantly claimed the ramp as their new favorite playground. They were zipping up and down on their bikes, skateboards, even scooters. It was like a mini X Games in my front yard. "This is awesome!" I overheard one kid yell to his friend. "It's like a roller coaster for cars!" Cars were slowing down, people craning their necks to get a better look. I even saw a few people taking pictures. My spiral driveway was officially a tourist attraction. Then came the news. The local news crew showed up with cameras and microphones, dubbing the whole thing the Spiral Driveway Feud. They interviewed me, asking about my motivations, my inspiration, my feelings about the whole situation. "Well," I said to the reporter, trying to keep a straight face, "it all started with a letter, about a driveway, and a certain individual's obsession with uniformity. I even got to give them a tour of the ramp, pointing out the LED lights, the decorative railings, the strategically placed HOA-approved sign. This I announced dramatically, is where the magic happens. So, Mr. Alex? The reporter asked. What do you have to say to the HOA? I paused, considering my words carefully. I'd like to thank them, I said finally, for inspiring me. Without their feedback, this masterpiece of petty engineering would never have existed. The segment aired that evening, and I watched myself on TV, talking about my spiral driveway. I felt like a celebrity, I recounted later. Albeit a celebrity with a ridiculously long driveway. Or, technically, a ridiculously short driveway, depending on how you look at it. My 15 minutes of fame had arrived, all thanks to Karen and her obsession with suburban conformity. And honestly, it was glorious. The news of my architectural abomination reached Karen's ears, as I knew it would, with the speed of a gossip wildfire. I pictured her, sitting in her perfectly manicured living room, sipping her perfectly brewed herbal tea, when suddenly, bam, the news flash. Her face, I imagined, would go through a fascinating series of contortions. Disbelief, confusion, then finally, the full crimson bloom of outrage. I didn't have to imagine it for long. The next morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on my newly constructed viewing platform, the highest point of the spiral, naturally, I saw her marching across my lawn, her face a truly impressive shade of purple. "Alexander!" she shrieked, her voice a weaponized foghorn. "What have you done?" "Good morning to you too, Karen," I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Lovely day?" she sputtered, her voice rising an octave. "My eyes are bleeding. The neighborhood is in chaos. Children are practically launching themselves into low Earth orbit from your monstrosity." "It's a driveway, Karen," I corrected, gesturing with my coffee mug. "A perfectly safe, HOA-approved compact driveway." "Compact?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "It takes 5 minutes to drive up that thing." "Well," I said, leaning back in my chair, "it does encourage mindful driving. Perhaps you should try it sometime." "Mindful driving," she practically exploded. "This isn't about mindful driving. It's about aesthetics, about conformity, about the sanctity of our suburban paradise." "Sanctity?" I chuckled. "Karen, this isn't a church. It's a neighborhood, with a really cool driveway." She sputtered, her face now a truly alarming shade of magenta. I thought her head was going to explode. It was glorious. You, she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "You've ruined everything." "On the contrary," I said, smiling sweetly, "I think I've made things a lot more interesting." She let out a strangled cry, spun on her heel, and stormed off, her arms flailing in the air like a distressed windmill. I watched her go, a sense of deep satisfaction settling over me. Karen, the queen of conformity, had been dethroned, and it was beautiful. The inevitable arrived in the form of another crisp, white, official-looking envelope. This time it was from the HOA's legal team. Yes, they actually had a legal team for driveways. The letter, even more verbose and passive-aggressive than the first, declared my spiral driveway a public nuisance and demanded its immediate removal. "Public nuisance," I scoffed, rereading the letter for the 10th time. "Please, it's not like I'm running a meth lab out of my garage, although that would probably be less annoying to Karen." I chuckled to myself. They were so predictable. They couldn't attack the driveway on aesthetic grounds anymore, so they'd resorted to the public nuisance angle. Classic HOA playbook. I grabbed my trusty copy of the city building codes, getting quite a workout lately, and reread the relevant sections. Nothing about spiral driveways being illegal. Nothing about them being a nuisance. In fact, the only thing the code stipulated about driveways was length. A slow, devious grin spread across my face. They'd made a crucial error, a fatal flaw in their bureaucratic armor. They were so focused on the what, a shorter driveway, that they completely forgot about the how. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Yes, I have a lawyer. Don't judge. So, I explained to him, they're saying it's a public nuisance. And is it? He asked dryly. Of course not, I said. It's just unconventional. And they only asked for a shorter driveway? He confirmed. That's right, I said gleefully. No stipulations about shape, design, or, spiraling. I see, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Well then, looks like you found a loophole. A glorious, spiral-shaped loophole, I corrected. Indeed, he chuckled. Leave it with me. I'll draft a response. A few days later, I received a copy of the lawyer's letter. It was a masterpiece of legal pedantry, pointing out the HOA's flawed logic and emphasizing the technical compliance of my driveway. They're so focused on the shorter part, I muttered. They completely forgot about the how part, their mistake, my entertainment. I knew this wasn't over. Karen and the HOA wouldn't give up that easily. But for now, I had won a battle. And the war? Well, the war was just getting interesting. Karen and the HOA, predictably, weren't about to admit defeat. Their next move was straight out of the HOA playbook, the safety card. They announced a mandatory safety inspection of my spiral driveway, claiming it was a hazard to the community. I'm not stupid, I muttered to myself. I knew they'd pull that card. I'd anticipated this move, of course. I wasn't about to build a multi-level concrete spiral without considering safety. I'd already hired a structural engineer, a meticulous fellow with a penchant for hard hats and even harder calculations, to certify the driveway's safety. He'd scrutinized every inch of the ramp, calculated load-bearing capacities, and generally made sure the whole thing wouldn't collapse under the weight of a smart car, let alone my SUV. All structural elements are sound and meet or exceed required safety standards, his report had stated. I had it printed, laminated, and ready to go. I had all my ducks in a row, or, in this case, all my cars on a ramp. The HOA inspectors arrived, clipboards in hand, looking as serious as if they were inspecting a nuclear power plant, not a driveway. They poked and prodded, measured angles, and generally tried to find something, anything, that would justify shutting down my masterpiece. They even brought a level, as if the slight incline of the spiral was somehow going to cause a catastrophic accident. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. The neighborhood, initially amused by the whole spectacle, started to rally behind me. They'd seen the spiral driveway for what it was, a symbol of rebellion against HOA tyranny. They were tired of Karen's constant nitpicking, her obsessive enforcement of rules that no one cared about. My spiral driveway had become their battle cry. "Don't let them bully you, Alex!" Mrs. Johnson, my normally quiet neighbor, shouted from her porch. "It's your property. You can build whatever crazy driveway you want." "Yeah," chimed in a teenager I didn't even know. "Spiral driveways are awesome." Even Mr. Peterson, the grumpiest man on the block, gave me a thumbs up. "That driveway's a work of art, Alex," he grumbled. "A crazy, beautiful work of art." The support was heartwarming and hilarious. My neighbors are awesome, I thought. They get it. They understand the sheer comedic genius of this whole situation. Then, someone suggested adding a car lift to the top level of the spiral, just to make it even more ridiculous. Now that, I thought, that's an idea I can get behind. The possibilities were endless. A spiral driveway with a car lift? Karen's head would explode. It would be glorious. Karen, bless her rigid, rule-obsessed heart, wasn't going down without a fight. Defeated on the safety front, she resorted to her ultimate weapon, the emergency HOA meeting. A flyer appeared on my doorstep announcing a meeting to discuss a proposed amendment to the neighborhood covenants, a ban on non-standard driveway configurations, specifically targeting spiral designs. She was desperate, I mused, a smirk playing on my lips. You could practically smell the desperation from a mile away. It was intoxicating. This wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It was about Karen's need for control, her desperate attempt to impose order on a world that dared to defy her vision of suburban perfection. And I, armed with my spiral driveway and a PowerPoint presentation, was ready to challenge her reign. The meeting was held in the community center, a beige box of a building that perfectly reflected the HOA's general aesthetic. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and projector, the hum of the machine a subtle counterpoint to the growing murmur of the gathering residents. Karen was there, of course, perched in the front row like a hawk, her eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fury and apprehension. "Let's do this," I whispered to myself, a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The meeting commenced, and Karen, with the gravitas of a self-proclaimed savior of suburbia, launched into her presentation. She spoke of visual harmony, community standards, and the erosion of property values. It was a masterpiece of fear-mongering, designed to appeal to the HOA's deepest anxieties. Then, it was my turn. I dimmed the lights, the projector flickered to life, and the first slide of my presentation appeared on the screen. The spiral driveway, a case for architectural diversity. I showed them diagrams, charts, graphs, I recounted later. I even had a PowerPoint presentation with animations and sound effects. I went all out. I meticulously deconstructed Karen's arguments, pointing out the inherent subjectivity of visual harmony and the lack of evidence linking spiral driveways to property value decline. Then, I unveiled my trump card, a series of aerial photos showcasing various houses in the neighborhood with driveways that, while not spiraled, were certainly not straight. "Are these driveways also a violation?" I asked, my voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Do they disrupt the visual harmony? Should we ban curves? Should we all be forced to live in a world of right angles and straight lines?" The room erupted. Residents, realizing the implications of Karen's proposed rule, began to voice their dissent. They didn't want to be forced to tear up their own perfectly functional, slightly curved driveways. They saw the absurdity of it all, the sheer pettiness of Karen's crusade. Karen, her face a mask of disbelief and frustration, tried to regain control, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Her desperate attempt to ban spiral driveways had backfired, exposing the absurdity of her own rigid worldview. "This is outrageous," Mr. Henderson, a man whose driveway had a slight curve to accommodate a mature oak tree, exclaimed, jumping to his feet. "Are you saying I have to tear up my driveway because it's not perfectly straight?" "This is about spiral driveways, Harold," Karen retorted, her voice tight with frustration. "Not about your slightly curved driveway." "Where do you draw the line, Karen?" Mrs. Peterson, whose driveway had a gentle slope, chimed in. "What about my driveway? Is that too curved? Will I have to spend thousands of dollars to rip it up and replace it?" "This is madness," another resident shouted. "We're talking about driveways, people, driveways." The room devolved into a cacophony of voices, each resident expressing their outrage at the implications of Karen's proposed rule. They started to see the light. They realized that Karen's vendetta against my spiral driveway was going to cost them money, and nobody messes with people's wallets. "Order! Order!" Mrs. Higgins, the HOA president, banged her gavel, but it was no use. The residents were in open revolt. Karen, her face a mask of disbelief and frustration, tried to regain control, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Her carefully constructed presentation, her impassioned pleas for conformity, had all backfired. She had underestimated the power of petty grievances and the collective resistance of a neighborhood united against her tyranny. "Let's put it to a vote," Mrs. Higgins announced, sensing the shift in the room. "All those in favor of amending the covenants to ban non-standard driveway configurations, please raise your hand." Karen's hand shot up, followed by, "No one." She looked around the room, her eyes wide with disbelief. Even her usual allies, the die-hard conformists, were hesitant to support her. They'd seen the error of her ways, the potential financial burden of her obsession with straight lines. "All those opposed?" Mrs. Higgins asked. A sea of hands filled the air. The vote was unanimous. Karen had been defeated. She huffed and puffed and stomped her feet like a toddler denied her favorite toy. "This is unfair," she shrieked. "You're all just jealous. You wish you had the guts to build a spiral driveway." With that, she stormed out of the meeting, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. It was the most satisfying thing I'd ever seen. The meeting adjourned, and I was surrounded by my neighbors, congratulating me, thanking me, even offering to help me build that car lift. We had won. The spiral driveway stood, a monument to our collective defiance of Karen's tyranny. And as for Karen? Well, let's just say she wasn't seen at the next HOA potluck. Life, as they say, goes on. And in my little corner of suburbia, it went on with a decidedly spiral-shaped twist. The HOA, thoroughly chastened, never again attempted to enforce any rule with even a hint of pettiness. They'd learned their lesson. Don't mess with Alex and their architectural audacity. Karen, however, couldn't cope. The sight of children gleefully whizzing down my spiral driveway on their bikes, the constant stream of tourists snapping pictures of my monstrosity, the sheer joy that seemed to radiate from my little corner of nonconformity. It was all too much for her. So she did what any self-respecting control freak would do. She moved. I heard she moved to a gated community with even stricter rules, my neighbor Mrs. Johnson told me, a hint of glee in her voice. Apparently, they have a committee that approves the color of your curtains. Good for her, I said, stifling a laugh. I'm sure she's much happier there, surrounded by people just as uptight as she is. With Karen gone, the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. We were free. Free to paint our houses slightly off-white, free to plant a slightly crooked row of petunias, free to embrace the glorious imperfection of life. And me? Well, I celebrated my victory in the most fitting way possible. I built another spiral. This one, however, wasn't for cars. It was a smaller, more elegant spiral, designed for pedestrians and bikes. It snaked its way through my front yard, connecting the sidewalk to my driveway, a whimsical, concrete invitation to embrace the joy of the unexpected. If one spiral driveway is good, I reasoned, two must be better, right? The neighborhood, of course, loved it. The kids had a new racetrack, the adults had a new walking path, and I had a new masterpiece to add to my collection of architectural absurdities. The spiral driveway and its pedestrian counterpart became a local landmark. People came from miles around to see it, to take selfies with it, to marvel at its sheer audacity. It was featured in the local newspaper, then the regional magazine, and finally, in a bizarre twist of fate, in a national architectural journal. It's on all the tourist maps now, I told my friend, shaking my head in disbelief. People come from all over the world just to see my driveway. I'm practically a celebrity. And it wasn't just tourists. Architecture students came to study it, artists came to sketch it, and even a few urban planners came to, well, I'm not sure what they were doing, but they seemed very impressed. The spiral driveway, born out of spite and a healthy dose of defiance, had become something more. It was a symbol of individuality, a testament to the power of creative expression, a middle finger to the forces of conformity. It was a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight the absurdity of the world is with a little absurdity of your own. And as I stood there, watching the sun set over my spiral-shaped creation, a sense of peace settled over me. I had won. I had defeated the HOA, vanquished Karen, and created something truly unique. The spiral driveway was my legacy, a concrete testament to the enduring power of petty revenge. And it was beautiful. "So," Bob drawled, scratching his beard, "you want to build a what now?" I spread out my blueprints, pointing to the various slides, flumes, and splash zones. "A water park," I said, grinning. "Right here, in my backyard." Bob's eyes widened. "You're kidding, right?" "Nope," I said, popping the P. "Completely serious. And it's gotta be epic. Think HOA annihilating levels of awesome." Bob let out a low whistle. "You're one crazy son of a gun," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I like it. Let's do this." And with that, Operation Backyard Water Park was officially underway. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," I'd say, trying to be polite. "Humph," he'd grunt, scowling at my perfectly trimmed hedges. "Those bushes are 2 inches too tall. See that they're rectified by tomorrow, or I'll report you." "Oh, and Mrs. Johnson," I'd add. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Indeed," she'd reply, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Did you hear about the Smiths' new hot tub? Apparently it's causing quite a stir." Yeah, this was the crew I was up against. A formidable bunch, to say the least. But little did they know, they were about to awaken a sleeping giant. A giant with a thirst for revenge and a love of water slides. The Homeowners Association, the self-proclaimed guardians of good taste and aesthetic harmony. They descended upon my peaceful neighborhood like a flock of pigeons on a freshly baked loaf of bread. These weren't your average, run-of-the-mill HOA folks, either. Oh no, this was a special breed. They patrolled the streets with the vigilance of prison guards, their eyes scanning for any violation of the sacred rulebook. And that rulebook, let me tell you, it was thicker than a dictionary, filled with more rules and regulations than the IRS tax code. All right, so, armed with my blueprints and a healthy dose of optimism, okay, maybe a little naivete too, I submitted my pool proposal to the HOA. I envisioned a beautiful oasis, shimmering in the sunlight, a perfect escape from the summer heat. I even included a detailed landscaping plan with carefully selected plants and a charming little waterfall. But my dreams were quickly shattered. The rejection arrived faster than you can say HOA power trip. Their reasons? Vague and utterly ridiculous. It doesn't maintain the aesthetic harmony of the community, they claimed. Aesthetic harmony? I scoffed. Have they seen Mr. Henderson's front lawn? It looks like a gnome graveyard. Excessive water usage, they argued. Excessive? I countered. Have they seen Mrs. Johnson's sprinkler system? It's practically creating a rainforest in her backyard. Undeterred, I attempted to negotiate. I offered to make the pool smaller, to blend it seamlessly into the landscape, even to host a community swim day to appease the masses. But Karen McGill, the HOA queen bee, was having none of it. "This is a family-friendly neighborhood," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. "We can't have unsightly distractions lowering property values." Unsightly distractions? I thought, my blood starting to boil. "Lady, your collection of ceramic frogs is an affront to good taste." But I kept my cool. Karen, I said, forcing a smile, this pool would be an asset to the community. It would provide a place for families to gather, for kids to play, for everyone to cool off on those scorching summer days. We appreciate your enthusiasm, she replied, her smile as fake as her tan, but the answer is still no. We must maintain the integrity of our community. Integrity, I muttered under my breath. More like rigidity. That's when I snapped. If they didn't want a pool, fine. I'd give them something much, much worse. All right, time to unleash my inner lawyer. I grabbed that monstrous HOA rulebook, the one that was practically begging to be used as a doorstop, and I started digging. And by digging, I mean scouring every page, every clause, every ridiculously specific rule about lawn gnome height and acceptable mailbox colors. Hours turned into days, and my eyes started to blur. But I was determined. I knew there had to be a loophole, a crack in the HOA's ironclad armor. And then, eureka! Buried deep within the document, nestled between a rule about fence heights and another about acceptable bird feeder designs, I found it. The golden ticket. The key to my backyard freedom. There was absolutely nothing in the rulebook about water-based landscaping projects, nothing about backyard entertainment, nothing about water parks. A mischievous grin spread across my face. "Oh, Karen," I whispered, "you've just made a very big mistake." I unleashed my inner mad scientist, the one who used to build elaborate Lego castles and design Rube Goldberg machines in my spare time. I sketched, I calculated, I dreamed. And slowly but surely, the most epic backyard water park the world had ever seen began to take shape on paper. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was about revenge. This was about showing the HOA that they couldn't control my backyard, my happiness, my right to have a little fun. And let's be honest, it was also about giving Karen McGill a giant, soaking wet headache. All right, time to bring in the big guns. I contacted a contractor, a guy named Bob who looked like he'd wrestled a few alligators in his time, and probably won. "So," Bob drawled, scratching his beard, "you want to build a what now?" I spread out my blueprints, pointing to the various slides, flumes, and splash zones. "A water park," I said, grinning. "Right here, in my backyard." Bob's eyes widened. "You're kidding, right?" "Nope," I said, popping the P. "Completely serious. And it's gotta be epic. Think HOA annihilating levels of awesome." Bob let out a low whistle. "You're one crazy son of a gun," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I like it. Let's do this." And with that, Operation Backyard Water Park was officially underway. The next few weeks were a symphony of construction chaos. Trucks rumbled down the street, delivering massive loads of fiberglass, steel, and concrete. Bulldozers roared at the crack of dawn, their engines shaking the neighborhood awake, and the sound of jackhammers echoed through the night, driving the HOA board members to the brink of madness. My neighbors, bless their curious hearts, couldn't help but stare. "What in the world is he building back there?" they whispered, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Karen McGill, of course, was in full panic mode. She'd show up at my doorstep every other day, clipboard in hand, her face a mask of disapproval. "Sir," she'd say, her voice trembling with indignation, "what exactly is going on here? This is not what we envisioned for our community." I'd smile innocently. "Oh, just a little landscaping project, Karen. You know, sprucing things up a bit. Totally within the HOA guidelines." She'd squint at the massive steel structures rising from the ground, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. But without a written rule to stop me, she was powerless. The absurdity of the situation reached peak levels when a crane arrived to install the giant water slide. It towered over the fence, visible from every corner of the neighborhood. It was like a giant middle finger to the HOA, a monument to my defiance. And Karen? Well, let's just say she nearly fainted. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gather round and feast your eyes on the ultimate backyard water park. Forget your inflatable kiddie pools and those sad plastic slip-and-slides. This, my friends, is the real deal. First up, we've got the Colossus of Slides. This bad boy towers over the fence, a multi-story behemoth of twists, turns, and sheer exhilarating drops. It's visible from practically every corner of the neighborhood, a giant, colorful beacon of fun and HOA defiance. Next, we've got the Lazy River of Dreams. This meandering waterway circles the backyard, inviting you to grab an inflatable donut and drift away on a current of pure relaxation. It's like a mini vacation right in your own backyard. And for those who crave a little excitement, there's the Wave Pool of Wonder. This ain't your grandma's wave pool, folks. We're talking artificial surf, crashing waves, the whole shebang. It's like having a mini ocean in your backyard without the sharks and the seaweed. But wait, there's more. The whole place is decked out with synchronized LED lights that change color to the beat of the music. And speaking of music, we've got a booming sound system pumping out the hottest summer jams. It's like a backyard rave, but with less questionable substances and more sunscreen. And if all that excitement makes you hungry, no worries. We've got the Snack Shack of sustenance, serving up all your favorite treats. Think hot dogs, popcorn, snow cones, and those giant pretzels that are bigger than your head. Step right up, folks, I yelled, donning my official snack vendor hat. Get your ice-cold lemonade, your sugary delights, your fuel for the fun. The HOA? Oh, they're somewhere in the distance, probably huddled in a corner, rocking back and forth and muttering about property values and community standards. But who cares? The party's just getting started. Okay, remember Karen McGill? The HOA queen bee with the permatan and the condescending smile? Well, let's just say her reaction to my backyard water park was nothing short of epic. Imagine this. Karen, decked out in her tennis whites and clutching her clipboard like a shield, marches over to my property, ready to unleash a torrent of HOA fury. But then she sees it. The Colossus of Slides, the Lazy River of Dreams, the Wave Pool of Wonder, all bathed in the glorious glow of 1,000 LED lights. Her jaw drops, her eyes widen, her perfectly coiffed hair practically stands on end. She looks like she's just witnessed a unicorn riding a roller coaster while juggling flaming torches. What in the name of HOA regulations is this? She sputters, her voice cracking with disbelief. I grin. Welcome to my humble abode, Karen. Enjoy the show. She sputters some more, trying to form coherent sentences, but it's no use. She's speechless, defeated, utterly and completely outmatched. The other HOA board members aren't faring much better. Mr. Henderson is clutching his chest, muttering about noise pollution and property value depreciation. Mrs. Johnson is frantically texting on her phone, probably updating her gossip network with the latest scoop. But their outrage is futile. They call an emergency HOA meeting, but it quickly descends into chaos. They try to fine me, but I hit them with my legal loopholes. They threaten to sue, but I remind them that I haven't actually broken any rules. They're frustrated. They're powerless. They're watching their carefully manicured world crumble around them. And it's glorious. This is madness, Karen shrieks, her voice echoing through the meeting room. This is anarchy. This is fun. And with that, she storms out of the room, leaving behind a trail of bewildered HOA members and a lingering scent of defeat. All right, so the HOA, bless their bureaucratic little hearts, decided to make one final stand. They called an emergency meeting, the kind where they bring out the folding chairs and the stale cookies. The atmosphere was tense, like a spaghetti western showdown, but with less tumbleweeds and more floral print blouses. Karen McGill, face pale with fury, slammed her gavel on the table. This outrageous behavior cannot stand, she declared, her voice trembling with indignation. We will not allow our peaceful community to be turned into a water park. The other board members chimed in, their voices rising in a chorus of disapproval. They threatened fines, legal action, even excommunication from the neighborhood potluck. Gasp. But I was ready for them. I stood up, armed with my trusty HOA rulebook and a stack of legal documents thicker than a phone book. Hold on a minute, I said, my voice calm and collected. Before you go throwing around threats, let's take a look at the facts. I pointed to a specific clause in the rulebook, the one about permissible landscaping projects. Nowhere does it say that I can't have a water-based landscaping project, I explained. And as for backyard entertainment, well, that's not regulated either. I then proceeded to cite local ordinances, building codes, and even a few obscure environmental laws. Thanks, Google. The HOA members looked increasingly bewildered, their faces contorted in confusion. Karen, bless her stubborn little heart, tried to argue. But the noise, the crowds, the fun, she sputtered. Well, Karen, I said, leaning forward with a smirk, it seems like you've got a choice to make. You can either embrace the fun or you can continue to fight a losing battle. What's it gonna be? The silence in the room was deafening. The HOA members looked at each other, their faces etched with a mixture of frustration and resignation. They knew they couldn't stop me. The water park was here to stay. And as I watched the defeat sink in, I couldn't help but smile. It was a glorious moment, a testament to the power of loopholes, legal knowledge, and a healthy dose of defiance. Okay, so, word got around. Fast. What started as a rebellious act of backyard defiance quickly turned into a local sensation. Kids, parents, even those teenagers who usually have their faces glued to their phones, they all flocked to my water park like moths to a very wet, very fun flame. The atmosphere was electric. Kids were screaming with joy as they zoomed down the colossus of slides, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Parents were lounging by the lazy river, sipping lemonade and actually having adult conversations, a rare sight in suburbia, let me tell you. And those teenagers? Well, they were busy documenting the whole thing on TikTok and Instagram, turning my backyard into a viral sensation. Suddenly, I was the coolest guy on the block. Parents were bribing me with cookies and car washes to let their kids in. Neighbors who used to give me the side eye were now waving enthusiastically and asking if I needed help cleaning the pool. The answer was always a resounding yes. Even the local news station caught wind of the commotion. They showed up with cameras and microphones, eager to capture the most ridiculous backyard in America. I gave them a tour, throwing in a few witty comments about the HOA and their aesthetic harmony obsession. The HOA, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly isolated. Their attempts to shut down the water park had backfired spectacularly. They were now seen as the grumpy old folks who hated fun, the villains in this epic tale of backyard rebellion. Karen McGill, bless her soul, tried to rally the troops. She organized protests, wrote angry letters to the editor, even attempted to start a petition to ban backyard water parks. But it was no use. The community had spoken, and they wanted fun, not fines. The HOA's popularity plummeted faster than a kid on the colossus of slides. Their meetings were sparsely attended, their pronouncements ignored. They were like a band playing to an empty stadium, their music drowned out by the joyous screams of children splashing in my wave pool. It was a beautiful thing to witness. The HOA, once the undisputed rulers of the neighborhood, were now a laughingstock. And I, The rebellious homeowner with a love of water slides had become the champion of the people. Okay, get ready for a plot twist that'll make your head spin. Just when the HOA thought they'd reached peak levels of despair, a mysterious letter arrived. It wasn't your average piece of mail, oh no. This was a game changer. The letter was from a theme park developer, a big-shot company with deep pockets and a love for all things fun. They'd seen the news reports, the social media frenzy, the sheer audacity of my backyard water park, and they were impressed. "We'd like to offer you a sponsorship," the letter read. "We want to expand your water park, make it even bigger, even better, even more HOA infuriating." Can you believe it? My little act of rebellion had caught the attention of a major corporation. They saw the potential, the sheer brilliance of my plan, and they wanted in. The HOA, meanwhile, was stunned into silence. Their jaws dropped, their eyes glazed over, and their carefully constructed world of rules and regulations crumbled around them. They'd been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and out-waterparked. Karen McGill, the once mighty HOA president, couldn't handle the defeat. She resigned in disgrace, her dreams of a beige-washed world shattered. I heard she moved to a retirement community where the only excitement was the occasional bingo night. The remaining HOA board members, realizing the error of their ways, did a complete 180. They embraced the water park, hailing it as a community asset and a beacon of family fun. They even organized a ribbon-cutting ceremony, complete with balloons, speeches, and awkward photo ops. And the neighborhood? Well, it was rebranded as Splash Springs Community, a testament to my victory over HOA tyranny. The once peaceful streets were now filled with the joyous sounds of splashing, laughter, and the occasional scream of excitement from the colossus of slides. It was a glorious transformation, a victory for fun, freedom, and the right to have a giant water slide in your backyard. And it all started with a pool proposal and a healthy dose of defiance.